In Ghana, donated clothes come from countries like the UK, the US, China, and are sold to exporters and importers who then sell them to vendors in places like Kantamanto in Accra, one of the world's largest second-hand clothing markets. These cheap clothing are called fast fashion. As fast fashion grows, the volume of clothing coming to the market has increased, while the quality has gone down drastically. But that's not the focus for today. Now, as these cheap clothes from China, Asia, and Europe increasingly end up in West Africa, pollution is rising, particularly in Ghana. And that is what we'll be discussing on Fafanwa Africa today. This is a show that spotlights the issues concerning the youth, their challenges, their opportunities across the African continent. I'm Blessings Mosugu, and I will be your host for the show. So sit tight, relax, and let's take you through 1 hour of bliss. Now, Ghana is being swamped by millions of unwanted clothes from the West. And like I said earlier, this creates an environmental disaster as textile waste piles up across the country. Now, the scale of damage to public health and the environment has been laid bare in a new report that exposes the devastating impact of these discarded clothing on the communities and ecosystems in Ghana. About 15 million items of second-hand clothing arrive in Ghana each week. Nearly half cannot be resold. Now, these unsellable clothes end up in informal, these unsellable clothes end up in informal dumps or are burned in public washhouses, contaminating the air, soil, and the water. Well, that said, I have some certain guests from Ghana who will be joining us to discuss this and make sense of the situation. I'm joined by Margaret Impraim, Assistant Coordinator, Youth Climate Council's Green Africa Youth Organization. Thank you so much, Margaret, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. Margaret is joining us from Accra, Ghana. We also have Glory Emmanuella-Appiah, who is the Acting National Coordinator, Ghana Youth Environmental Movement, Accra, Ghana as well. Thank you so much, Glory, for joining us. All right, Gloria, I think your device is muted. We also have some guests who will be joining us shortly, but in the meantime, we have Glory and, of course, we have Margaret. So let me start with the obvious question. Margaret, we know that this, clothes fast fashion disaster is becoming a very concerning one in Ghana. What is the most pressing environmental challenges that are related to textile waste in the country?
Yes, like you said, and I think with a little bit of snapshots that you showed on the screen, there's been a lot of issue coming in, particularly because of the importation of these second-hand goods. And all people would probably purchase them because they are less expensive, and so they'll come in, and most of them are actually waste. Because when you go to the very major areas like Kantamanto, where people have those thrifts and on those second-hand clothing, most of the time after the people had gone to pick out the import usable ones, most of them become unusable and then they end up as waste. And this is actually one thing that we're really facing. And as part of what Green Africa organization, what we do, we strive a lot to deal with the issue of waste, particularly fashion waste. And so what we do as part of our campaigns with communities and even with municipalities is to campaign and to create the awareness of having made them segregate the waste. So ensuring that, one, they don't burn the waste, because people are tempted to burn these clothes and these extra waste whenever they come in the system. And as you know, burning of these waste is very harmful in the environment. Lots of air pollution coming in and lots of health issues. And so once such things that are segregated from source, you have people who are actually willing to use these things to create useful things like a tote bag. And so Green Africa organization, we have a couple of recyclers that we work with, for instance, Upcycle Ghana, they are an organization that deals with using the, in quotes, waste clothes to make things like tote bags and very beautiful ones as well. And if you actually see that, you will not realize that these ones are actually waste clothes. So this is just to say that whatever form of clothes that you have, whether from your home or from wherever you find, it actually has use. You just have to make sure you repurpose this waste. And this is something that will even help you, one, prevent the whole dumping of these waste in the landfills, because people would not want to pour the waste in the landfill because they are getting full, so they'll end up burning it. So why don't we actually make sure that we help collect these things and give to needed, for instance, the recyclers, then they can use that. And even for our households, we also can learn our own DIYs, how to repurpose our own home waste, home clothes waste into tote bags or any other thing that could serve as purpose for us.
All right. Thank you so much, Margaret, for that. Now, Glory, let me come to you. How does the burning of these unsellable clothes affect the air quality and public health in Ghana? Gloria, are you with us? I think your device is muted. Gloria, are you there? Gloria, I think your device is muted. Okay, so while we try to establish connections with Glory, let me come back to you, Margaret. I was asking what the long-term effects of, or what the, what I say, how the burning of unsellable clothes affects or pollutes the air, and to what extent this affects the people.
So I think we all know the issue of air pollution, and we all know what harmful substances come out from these things. Imagine having even paper and you're burning it, even the smoke that comes out. Imagine the harmful causes that comes from even inhale these things, let alone the fabric. The fabric that you don't know what's even used to produce this fabric. And if you're burning them, it's going to come out as smoke, lots of harmful substances. And these things, of course, is going to have lots of effects like lung cancer and also a lot of respiratory infections and respiratory diseases that might come up. And so the issue of burning actually is not the solution of dealing with these kinds of waste. I think that's one thing that we try as much as possible to help people understand. The issue of dealing with these waste is never burning them. I mean, burning, whether in a form of incineration or any form of area where you want to burn, it's not the solution, because at the end of the day, you're going to accumulate a lot of harmful substances that's going to affect the air quality. And having places like Accra, where already we are having lots of issues of the greenhouse gas emissions coming in from the fumes, from our cars, also from a lot of other forms of burning. Imagine having these things coming in, going to definitely add up to the greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know what the climate change has posed for us. So having an area where there are already existing causes or existing exacerbating causes of the whole climate issue, and adding this big fabric menace, burning a lot, like tons of fabric, it's actually not going to be our solution. And so we have to find ways to, one, in terms of policies, ensure that we stop even the importation of these things, because it's never the solution. Ghana should never be the dumping site of these plastic, these fabric waste. It's never something that we should actually go in for. Whatever you want to do, there definitely are going to be innovators here who would know how to even produce these things. There are lots of fabrics here in Ghana that we can actually produce lots of very creative clothes. You don't have to necessarily import clothes coming in from a different place, and they're even secondhand. They're not even clothes that are even like of a quality grade for you to use. So when it even comes down, it's actually going to even be a waste even from the get-go. So one, ensuring that there are policies that would actually prevent the importation of these things, because these things come in and we have people at immigration, people from the shores who receive them. So if there are policies that would, one, even prevent the importation of these things, one, you won't have them coming in. And two, at least you learn how to manage the waste, because unfortunately, yes, there's been a waste issue. There's a lot in the system. So let's even stop taking more, that is one. And let's deal with how to even save what we are having within us. Let's learn how to deal with it. And let's make sure that we don't even bring in more to add up to it. And how to deal with whatever is in there is one, making sure that we find ways to repurpose this waste.
Right. Okay.
Because at this point
okay.
in time, waste is waste.
Margaret, if you can hear me.
Actually, it's a secondary resource.
Okay, so if you can hear me, I would like for us to talk about the long-term effects of textile waste in Ghana's ecosystem. We've talked about how it's affecting people now, but what do you think are the long-term effects if it continues like this?
Thank you, Blessing. So for the long-term effects of textile waste, we would have to start from, first of all, the ocean pollution that comes with it, where the fabric waste is dumped in the ocean, and then which in turn pollutes the marine ecosystem, where we have fishes, we have coastal reefs getting loaded with this fabric waste, and most of these fabrics are chemically treated as well. And then when it happens that it gets into contact in the ocean for a long time, the chemicals in these fabric tend to break down and then tends to mix up with the ocean water, which makes it either acidic or more too alkaline for the life in the ocean to be able to thrive. And when we move from the marine ecosystem, we can also move to the terrestrial ecosystem, which is the land or even the forest or any form of land resource that we have, where we have these fabrics ending up on landfills, ending up on people's farms, ending up in gutters, ending up in drainage systems, and then it tends to cause bigger problems like flooding, and flooding destroys lives, flooding destroys property, flooding robs people of their livelihood. And so these effects of these textile waste can be seen to be a rippling effect, because first of all, the drainages get choked. It has effects on public health, because when drainages are choked, water is not flowing. When water is not flowing, it leads to illnesses such as malaria, dysentery, etc. And then from there, when there are heavy rains in the country, it also leads to flooding, which can carry away people's property, which can destroy people's homes, which can also even bring an end to people's form of livelihood. So fast fashion is a problem that is progressing as we speak. And if changes or certain measures are not put in place to curb this problem and to stop using Africa as a dumping site for these fashion waste, we see ourselves having a long-term crisis, and we don't see ourselves as an African country, or we don't see ourselves as a global south coming out of this mess that is being caused by other people. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Glory, and it's glad to have you finally join us, and we've been able to establish connection. Now, Margaret, still talking about long-term effects, how does the contamination of soil and water impact local communities? Because these used clothing are mostly found around the beaches.
I think like Gloria already mentioned, these things affect our marine ecosystems, and most of these communities fall in marine ecosystem for fish. And so imagine these
All right, Margaret, we're having issues with your network, if you can hear me. But let me come to you, Gloria. Margaret was trying to answer, but unfortunately her network is buffering at the moment. But Gloria, I was talking about the effect it has on soil and water, because we know that these used clothing are found around the water, and that can be detrimental to the people.
Like I mentioned, with the marine ecosystem pollution, where we have the communities, coastal communities, depending on the fish that they get from the sea as the form of livelihood, it happens to be an instance where when the ocean is polluted, the aquatic animals in the ocean tend to fend for themselves, and by fending for themselves, they tend to move away from the polluted parts of the ocean, which means that they move further away, and then it makes it difficult for fishermen and fishmongers who reside on these coastal communities to even get a form of livelihood. Again, even if they do get this fish, some of these fishes may have been contaminated due to the chemicals that have seeped into the ocean from the textile waste, and then it affects anybody who consumes that fish will get infected or will get in a form of disease or a form of illness. To move from the water or the marine ecosystem to the terrestrial ecosystem would have these textile waste filling up the soil or getting in the soil and blocking spaces and preventing the soil aeration. So a farmer may go to a piece of land, may decide to farm, unknowing to him, that soil has been mixed up with some fabric, have been mixed up with some textile waste, but with a constant rain and with a constant moving of the topsoil to different places, he doesn't know that his soil or his land that he has acquired is mixed with fabric waste. And then he may go there to plant and he may not get the yielded results from his crops as he's supposed to get, because the soil is now mixed up with fabric, which is preventing the flow of soil organisms, which is preventing the flow of air in the soil and also preventing the growth of the root system of the crops. These and many other things are what leads to the effects that normal people or community members derive from the fast fashion that we are talking about.
All right, Margaret, do we have you? Can you confirm that you can hear me, please? Okay, Glory, we're still waiting for Margaret, but let me just ask, are there any efforts by the government, especially seeing as we just had the COP summit recently, are there any efforts to implement sustainable waste management practices in Ghana?
Any efforts on the part of government would lead to the implementation of the cleanup exercise on the first Saturday of every month by the government, the current sitting government, which sees community members cleaning up their surroundings on every first Saturday of every month. But for me, I think that is not enough. Every day should be a cleanup day, because if the cleanup, if citizens see cleanup as something that they have to do just once a month, then it means that waste has the time to pile up and then it will only be cleared once. And even if it's cleared once, what is the urgency in carrying this waste to where it's supposed to be disposed of? What is the urgency in making sure that there are bins at vantage points in the community? I think that one thing that governments can really focus on or look at to help us with this issue of sustainable waste management would be to inculcate the waste segregation system into the country, because currently we have, Ghana has a system where all forms of waste are put together and then are just picked up by the waste truck. So why doesn't government just look into waste segregation, and we can start from there and then move along with when it comes to sustainable waste management?
Okay, so also I'm curious to know if there are estimates on the economic cost of textile waste in Ghana. If you were to put a number to it, how costing is it economically when it comes to textile waste and what it causes in the country?
The economic putting a cost to fashion waste would be in the billions of dollars, honestly, because the amount of fast fashion that is dropped in Ghana is a lot. It's coming from China, it's coming from UK, it's coming from the US, and not all of these are worn, honestly, not all of these are worn. And it comes and it chokes up the system. I mean, you have vendors or traders who are buying these materials, finding out that some of them are complete waste and they would have lost their money. And then you have governments also having to spend a lot of money to clean out this waste from the system. And then you have governments also having to input money to deseal the ocean, to deseal our lagoons, to deseal our water bodies that have also been choked with these waste materials. So it boils down to a lot. So there's an economic implication in the waste sector. There's an economic implication to people who even buy this, before there's an economic implication to the consumers as well.
Okay, we've talked about the economic implication, but let's talk about the health risks associated with the exposure to textile waste. What is the percentage of those who have been affected? How risky is it for the people, especially those in the communities where this is more prominent?
Can you come again?
All right, so I was talking about the health risk to the people, those living closer to the areas where these used clothing are found, especially those using the water that mostly is affected by these used clothing that are discarded near the beaches. What is the level of health risk that it poses to the people in Ghana?
There is a very high level of health risk for these people. About 60-65% of these people may suffer from waterborne diseases like elephantiasis, dysentery, and cholera, even cholera, because these clothes piling up, being soaked up in the water bodies can lead to the breeding of certain parasites and certain other infectious diseases. So the people specifically living close to the coastal areas or close to water bodies or even close to drainage systems that have been choked have a high risk of acquiring some of these infectious diseases.
Mm. All right. I think we have Margaret now, but I need to confirm. Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, great. I can. Okay. So before we go on break, we just talked about the health hazards, but I want us to streamline it to the most vulnerable people in the communities, and that's talking about the children and the elderly. How do you think that this pollution affects those who are the most vulnerable in the communities?
So the issue of this whole clothing waste, I think for most of the children and all those who are vulnerable, I think for me, what I would say the first thing is when the burning actually happens. And when that happens, it creates a whole lot of issues with regards to respiratory health. And this is one thing that people really don't take note of because one, they burn their clothes even in their homes. So people actually start having clothing waste beginning right from their homes, even before it even goes outside to the areas like the Kantamanto and the other big shops or big markets that sell these old clothing or they sell these second-hand clothing. And so I think one thing that we need to try to look at is to, one, avoid the burning of these clothing waste. That is one. The other thing with regards to those who are vulnerable, again, I'll just reiterate what Lori Emmanuella already mentioned, that one, when the things are dumped, particularly because most of these, how do I say it, the folks that gather the waste, the tricycles that gather the waste, most of the time the landfills, when they are full, they take it straight to the sea. And that's what has been happening here in Ghana. Most people take their waste straight into the sea. And this is where it just goes straight to the marine ecosystem. So imagine children who are going there, they want to try to catch some fish, or they want to try to do something, and then they go.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies. We'll go on a short break. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We'll go on a short break now, but we'll still continue the conversation when we get back. Thank you, Margaret. And okay. Thank you so much, Margaret. So I just got to know that this is the end of our session together. Unfortunately, we would have been able to talk extensively, but we have other guests that we'll be discussing this same topic with after the break. So Margaret Impraim, Assistant Coordinator, Youth Climate Council, Green Africa Youth Organization, thank you so much for joining us. And Glory Emmanuella-Appiah, Acting National Coordinator, Ghana Youth Environmental Movement, thank you as well for joining us to discuss this. All right, many thanks for staying with us. We're still talking about the crisis in Ghana, where used clothing that are unsellable are being discarded around the beaches in the country. And Ghana has, because of this, become a dumping ground for the world's unwanted textiles with devastating consequences for local ecosystems. Now, the flood of cheap disposable fashion reflects broader problems with global waste management and environmental justice. Joining us to have this conversation, first I'm joined by Say Nekpreti Emmanuel, Research Assistant, University of Education, Winneba, Ghana, who's joining us, of course, from Winneba. Thank you so much for joining us, Emmanuel. All right. Also joining us, we have Stephen Appiah, National Service Person, Bremen M&A Junior High School. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us as well.
You're welcome.
All right, so we will be joined by the other guests very shortly, but Stephen, let's just go ahead in the meantime. So before now, I had my guests who had discussed about this extensively, but I want to hear from your perspective what you think the health risks that are associated with exposure to textile waste in Ghana are.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. Now, before I proceed with some of these health risks associated with specifically plastic waste in Ghana, let me first share this story that I personally experienced at one of the Ghana's beaches in Winneba, that is St. Charles Beach. Now, it is an eyesore to see piles of plastic waste just at the beaches. Now, we conducted a project on how far the close season is impacting the lives of fisher folks within the Winneba community. Now, upon engaging and then interacting with the fisher folks, we got to know that a number of issues account for this plastic waste at the beaches. So, for example, a fisherman shared with us that their abandoned fish lines and then nets contribute to this waste or this plastic waste at the Winneba beaches. And so we asked, then what is the implication for the marine life and then even the community members? And so what this nobleman shared with us was that it affects the lives of these fishes. So for example, ingestion of these plastic waste, one, contribute to the death of a number of marine lives. And also adding up, it was told that even the community members that also take fish as a food source, by ingestion, they also get to, just to ingest also some of these plastic waste. So for example, microplastics. So they get to ingest it, and then it will have several health implications for these individuals. And so we asked about, so how far is the harvest from the fish? And the results was claiming that because of the numerous plastic waste that have engulfed these beaches, now they don't even have that kind of bumper harvest that they used to have, because there has been a reduction in the number of fishes that these fisher folks, when they go for fishing, they get. And so by this experience, I would say that plastic waste is a reality when it comes to Ghana, and specifically Winneba, and more specifically at the St. Charles Beach, where you can see a number of plastic waste within the sea. So as the offshore and then the onshore, you get to see that a number of waste are being brought to the seashore. Yes, because when we went there, we saw a number of people directly littering around the place. They just come and then dump the waste over there. Some entails water bottles, empty sachets, clothes, and a whole lot. And so these, by ingestion, individuals are getting a number of serious health implications from these plastic waste at the various beaches. Yes, and so I think from my experience, that is what I will share when it comes to plastic waste and then the implication for marine life and the community members. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you think that communities can mitigate the health impact of these textile wastes?
All right, thank you so much. So let me start from right there, what some community members are doing. So for instance, last year, that was 2023, students of the Biological Science Department at the University of Education, Winneba, in collaboration with EXA, they engaged in a cleanup exercise at the place. And not that alone, they also advocated for community members to engage in the buying of second-hand goods and also avoid using single-use plastics. Yeah, because those are the items that are most commonly seen at the beaches as waste. And so they advocated. And so I second to these advocates that as individuals, we should contribute by buying second-hand goods, and also we should avoid direct littering at the beaches. Now, more to ask about regulations. It appears that there is inadequate regulations and enforcement. Individuals feel comfortable littering directly at the beaches, and they feel safe. They feel okay to do that. And so I believe that when we intensify regulatory systems in the country by the Fishing Commission in our country, then I think it will go a very long way to mitigate this whole textile waste that we've been seeing in our communities. Yes.
So also talking about the health sector, are there any initiatives to provide healthcare services to some of the affected communities that are already ravaged by this?
All right, thank you so much. Let me also retreat from my previous experience at the same community. Now, community members made it known to us that some of their children were complaining of diseases of which they perceive to have caused by them taking in marine food sources. And so the chief compounds within the community, we were told that they are providing some kind of minor treatment for these individuals. So individuals that show signs of any of these are being taken to the places, and then they are being taken care of. But as to whether there is a direct intervention specifically tailored to address these diseases caused by the textile waste, as to that one, I am not sure of it. But community members made it aware that chief compounds, dispensaries over there, when they exhibit signs of these, they do attend to them and also share some informative ideas with them as to them avoiding littering around the place directly. Yeah, so I think that is what I will share on this one too.
Okay, so let's go now to the responsibility of the government. And I'm interested to know, how can the government, the private sector, and civil society collaborate to address textile waste altogether?
All right, thank you. So now let me start from the civil societies. Now, I believe civil societies can also engage in education and creating awareness. Yes, and so to take from the words of Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful tool that we can use to change our society. So I believe that when civil societies are also engaged in education and then sensitization program, then it will go a long way for these individuals to know how they are also a cause to this issue that we are talking about. Once they are sensitized about these issues, I believe that they will also do their part to help address this issue. Now, talking of the private sector, I will also say that private sectors, they can really also mount up sensitization programs and also support sustainability programs at the beaches and also in our various communities, because these waste generate or start from the community and now trickle to the beaches. And so they can also collaborate with community members, engage up in sensitization programs, and also create awareness, and also fund some of these sustainability projects at the beaches and the communities. Now, more importantly, the government, that is the CEO of our country, one, I would say that the government, through its fishery communities and also environmental ministries. Now, I believe they can also help address this issue. One is through research. The government should support research endeavors by faculties in our various universities who can also help identify some of these causes and effects. And notwithstanding, the government can also undertake some of these sustainability projects at our places. Now, the use of single-use plastics is a commonplace in our country. And so government can intensify laws and policies that will aim at reducing the use of single waste and then encouraging members to use more sustainable goods that can be a substitute for these plastic waste that we've been seeing in our communities.
So do you think that it's an option to stop this importing of clothes, used clothes that mostly are unsellable altogether from these other countries to Ghana? Do you think that that can be halted temporarily?
Very good. That is a very nice idea. But as to it coming to a halt, I believe it will take a gradual process. Yes, and I personally do not side with that, because the use of these fast fashion, individuals use them, and then with just a twinkle of an eye, it is no more used again, and these goods are being ended up in our oceans. And so when it's coming out with an immediate halt, I believe we have to take a more gradual process, and then through sensitizing our members, creating awareness, individuals using a more sustainable fashion, I believe that one will go a long way to help us address this issue. But for it to come to a halt at the moment, I believe it is not possible if we are looking at it now. But if we are putting in a more gradual process, then I think it is possible that we can together address this whole issue.
Okay, so speaking of options, there is another option, but the challenge is, the climate change. Because I'm wondering, as opposed to flooding the beaches with so many clothes, there is the option of actually burning these clothes up. Has anyone ever taken that initiative, and what are the dangers of taking that as an option?
All right, thank you so much. Now, taking the initiative of burning some of these clothes, community members have been seen doing this more and more often. But I believe it goes a long way, creating a number of respiratory diseases for community members. And so I think it is not the best option, but conveniently, community members are taking it as the most appropriate option. And in a way, I would say that is what is convenient and feasible for them at the moment. And so I think that is what some are doing. But the dangers far outweigh the benefit that we gain from this. Yes. So it causes a number of respiratory diseases for community members, because some of these plastics, inherent in them are a number of chemicals. So should we breathe in these chemicals in a way causes a number of respiratory diseases towards them.
So looking at the impact of climate change and what it can possibly become in the next 5 years, where do you see Ghana in the next 5 years if this textile waste problem continues?
Wow, that is really good. Now, in the next 5 years, if I'm to project, then I would say, should we not address this issue with a more effective measures? Then in the next 5 years, it is going to be, Ghana is going to find itself within a danger zone. Yes, because looking at a number of reports from the medical sectors about people with respiratory diseases being sourced from microplastics and a number of these issues, then should we not address the issue more urgently? Then in the next 5 years to come, we are going to record more and more of these respiratory diseases being affected by community members in our country.
Do you think that Ghana has it worse when it comes to waste problem? Because we understand that there are other African countries that also are ravaged by waste problem. Maybe not fashion waste, but how do you think Ghana compares to other countries when it comes to these waste problems?
All right, thank you. Now, for example, in my community here in Bremen, what some other companies, both private and then government or public. Now, for example, the issue of plastic waste, that is empty sachet. What we are doing now as a country is that, for example, my community, members are being encouraged to gather these empty water sachet and then exchange for money. So waste, in a way, is becoming worth. So in a way, people, when they even dump with, what you call some of these plastic waste in the environment, others are also taking it consciously. Why? Because it is going to get them money. And so should the government and the private sector also come in like this, incentivizing people that they should exchange waste for money, then I think in a way we can also go by words and then help mitigate some of these issues that our country is facing. And by doing this, in the next 5 years or decade to come, Ghana is going to be one of the countries that is actually making strides when it comes to waste management in its best or appropriate way.
All right. Well, I think that since we're still comparing Ghana with other countries, what would you say are some approaches or policies that other countries have adopted when it comes to tackling waste issues that Ghana can learn from?
Very good. I think the best and then the first and foremost that almost each and everyone would like to see is the strategy of recycling. Yes, and then repurposing. Now, I believe if Ghana is to engage in recycling and repurposing the number of waste that we generate in the country, then in a way we can also be seen as one of the advanced countries in the world. And one thing that we know of these countries is their approach in recycling. Now, because we cannot do away with waste, there are a number of ways in which we generate waste in our countries. But one thing that we can use to address this is by recycling. Now, should we generate a waste in our country and then we want to reduce it, or we don't want it to be in its highest extreme? And one thing that we can do is to recycle it. So by recycling and also repurposing, using it for other purpose. The waste we create, can't we use it for other purpose? Yes, it can. So strategically, we can do that by innovative ways. So I think recycling and then repurposing will be what I would say for now. If we do that, it will help us in a number of ways.
Okay, so one final question before we go. What role would you say that the individuals themselves can play? We've talked about the communities, we've talked about the government. What role can the people themselves play in limiting the effect or reducing these textile waste problem in Ghana?
All right, thank you very much. So as an individual, even like myself, now a way that we can all play to address this whole issue of plastic and the textile waste. One, so for example, when we talk about these fast fashion clothes, one go to markets like in Ghana, we have the Keditia market here, right, in Kumasi. When you go there, you get a number of second-hand used clothes, and we can patronize that one too. So when we do that, instead of we dumping them and then directly throwing them in the environment and even ending up in our oceans, I believe when we engage in the purchasing of second-hand clothing, it will also help us. And more importantly, we individuals, for example, just today, I was going out to buy food, and instead of me buying the food from, or what do you call it, to be given in a plastic, I rather bought the one that the woman was using leaves. So the food was served for me in a leaf. And so I think when we go by these practices, it will also help us a lot. And personally, as individuals, change can start from us, regardless of how small we may see it. We can engage in personal advocacy by creating awareness within our circles. So we can advise people, we can sensitize people on some of these practices that I have talked about. So avoiding the use of single-use plastics, going in for substitutes that are more sustainable than those that will incur us a number of health implications. I think when we do these, as well as purchasing second-hand used clothes, then in a way, we can also help address these issues that we are talking about.
All right. Well, I know that I did say that it was a final question, but what role can education and awareness also play in reducing textile waste in 60 seconds?
All right. Thank you so much. So as a teacher and then educator, one thing that I have been doing. So, for example, I once gave a project to my students that they should go out and then look in the environment and then try to count the number of plastic waste that they can identify in the environment. And the report was that, sir, we couldn't count them. And so I told them that the issue of plastic waste is something that is above us. It's something that is above our shoulders. But regardless of the small impact that we can all make, it will help address this issue. You dump it, I dump it, the number continues and continues. And so by creating this awareness, talking of the health implications that individuals are going to have, talking of how it is going to create nuisance in the environment, then these people now become convinced, then it is my role for me as an individual not to do this or to do the right thing at the right time. So I think in a way, educators can do this by creating awareness. Yeah.
All right, Stephen Appiah, National Service Person, Bremen M&A Junior High School. Thank you so much for joining us and discussing the issue at hand in Ghana. And we're hoping that there is a resolution to it before it escalates more than we can handle. Thank you once again.
Okay. Come.
All right, that's the much we can take on Fafanama Africa today. Thank you so much for joining in and listening in on the conversation. This is the pressing issue in Ghana as of this moment, but do also join us in our subsequent episodes as we give you more stories and issues that pertain to the youth across the African continent, from their challenges to the opportunities and the problems and solutions that are placed before them. My name is Blessings Musugu and I've been your host for this 1 hour. Join us again on our next episode. Till then, have a beautiful day.